The moment the four little girls saw the faded tattoo on Corwin Hale's forearm, they stopped laughing. Their bright yellow lemonade stand sat beneath the afternoon sun, surrounded by paper flowers and handwritten signs, but suddenly none of them seemed interested in selling another cup. The eldest girl stared at the small compass wrapped in a broken circle on Corwin's skin, then looked at her three sisters as though they had discovered something impossible. A second later, she stepped closer and said the words that made his heart stop inside his chest. Their mother had a tattoo exactly like his. Corwin's fingers tightened around the plastic cup until lemonade spilled across his hand. For 11 years, he had believed only two people in the world carried that symbol. One was him. The other was a woman who had vanished from his life without explanation, leaving behind a folded letter, an empty apartment, and a wound he had never learned how to close. Before we continue, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Eco-Verse if you believe in kindness and second chances. Sometimes the person we think we have lost forever is only waiting on the other side of a truth we were never ready to hear. Corwin had not planned to stop at the lemonade stand that Saturday afternoon. He had been walking home from the neighborhood hardware store with his 8-year-old son, Tavian, carrying a bag of paint rollers and a small tin of sky blue paint. Tavian had convinced him that their old backyard treehouse needed to look less like an abandoned shed and more like a castle in the clouds. Since Corwin rarely refused his son anything that involved imagination, they had spent the morning choosing supplies, arguing playfully about whether the door should be blue or green, and eating warm pretzels outside the store. It had been a good day, which was not something Corwin took for granted. 6 years earlier, Tavian's mother had died after a sudden illness, leaving Corwin to raise their son alone. The grief had changed both of them. Tavian became quieter and afraid of falling asleep without the hallway light on, while Corwin learned to pack lunches, attend parent meetings, remove stains from school uniforms, and hide his own loneliness until the house was silent. He worked as a city bus mechanic, left home before sunrise on weekdays, and returned with grease beneath his fingernails and exhaustion in his bones. Yet every afternoon he collected Tavian from school himself whenever possible, because he had learned how quickly ordinary routines could become precious memories. That Saturday, Tavian had noticed the lemonade stand first. 4 girls stood behind a folding table at the edge of a public park, all wearing mismatched sun hats. The eldest appeared to be around 10, with serious gray eyes and a protective way of watching the younger 3. Beside her stood a pair of twins who could not have been older than 7, and the smallest girl, perhaps 5, was arranging cookies into crooked rows while secretly eating the broken ones. Tavian tugged Corwin toward them, insisting that castle builders required lemonade. Corwin smiled, placed money in their jar, and rolled up his sleeve when the smallest girl accidentally splashed his arm while filling the cup. That was when the eldest saw the tattoo. The symbol had once been sharp and black. Now it had faded into Corwin's skin, but every line still carried a memory. The compass had no letters marking north or south. Instead, its needle pointed toward a tiny star, while the circle surrounding it remained deliberately broken at the bottom. Corwin and a young woman named Elowen had designed it together when they were 23. They had been reckless, poor, and deeply in love. The broken circle represented lives that did not have to be perfect to become whole. The compass meant that no matter how far they wandered, they would find their way back. At least, that was what they had promised each other. The eldest girl introduced herself as Solara, then named her sisters, twins Bryony and Callista, and little Fenna, who had lemonade on her chin. Solara explained that their mother's tattoo was hidden beneath her left shoulder blade, but the girls had seen it many times when helping her apply medicine to an old injury. Bryony added that their mother sometimes touched the tattoo when she was sad. Callista said their mother had once told them it belonged to a story that ended before it was supposed to. Fenna simply smiled and announced that perhaps Corwin was part of the missing ending. Corwin felt the sun pressing against the back of his neck, but his body had gone cold. He asked their mother's name, already knowing what answer he feared and hoped to hear. Solara said it was Elowen. The park seemed to tilt around him. Tavian looked up at his father, sensing the change in him. Corwin had told his son very little about the woman from his youth. Elowen had belonged to the time before marriage, before fatherhood, and before grief had made Corwin cautious with every piece of his heart. She had been the daughter of a respected local doctor, while Corwin had been a mechanic's apprentice who lived above a laundromat. They had met during a summer charity project when Elowen volunteered to repair homes damaged by a storm. Corwin had arrived to fix a generator, and Elowen had laughed when he accidentally sprayed himself with muddy water. Their friendship had grown through long daytime drives, crowded diners, and afternoons spent planning a life neither of them could afford. They had intended to marry. Corwin had even bought a modest silver ring and hidden it inside a toolbox because their apartment had no safe place. Then, one autumn morning, he returned from work to find Elowen gone. Her clothes had disappeared. Her phone had been disconnected. All she left was a short note saying she had made a terrible mistake and that Corwin should not search for her. He had searched anyway. He called hospitals, friends, relatives, and every number he could find. Elowen's father claimed she had left the state and wanted nothing more to do with him. Her friends stopped returning his calls. Weeks became months. Eventually, Corwin accepted that the woman who had promised to find her way back had chosen another direction. 2 years later, he met Tavian's mother, Mireia. Mireia knew there was an old scar inside him, but she loved him without demanding that he pretend it had never existed. Their marriage was not a replacement for what he had lost. It was a different kind of love, steadier and quieter, built from shared bills, sleepless nights, and the miracle of their son. When Mireia died, Corwin believed life had taken enough from him. He stopped expecting surprises that did not hurt. Now 4 little girls were standing in the sunlight, telling him that Elowen lived only a few streets away. Solara noticed his trembling hands and asked whether he knew their mother. Corwin could not lie to her. He said that he had known Elowen a long time ago, before any of the girls were born. The children exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from curiosity to concern. Solara explained that their mother had been struggling for months. She worked from home restoring old books, but a recent accident had injured her spine and made walking painful. Their father had never been part of their lives, and although Elowen tried to hide their financial problems, the girls understood more than she realized. The lemonade stand was meant to raise money for groceries without making their mother feel ashamed. Corwin glanced at the jar. It contained less than $20. Something inside him broke open. He bought every remaining cup and cookie, though he quietly returned most of them to the table so the girls could continue selling. Tavian placed his own saved allowance in the jar, then shrugged when Corwin looked at him with pride. The girls gave them directions to their house, but Corwin did not immediately go. Fear held him beside the stand. For years, he had imagined meeting Elowen again. In some versions, he demanded answers. In others, he walked past her without speaking. But standing beneath the clear afternoon sky, he realized none of those imagined moments had included 4 daughters or a body weakened by pain. Tavian asked whether the woman had hurt him. Corwin answered carefully that sometimes people disappeared because they did not love us, and sometimes they disappeared because they were afraid. The difficult part was not knowing which reason belonged to Elowen. Tavian considered this, then told his father that they should ask her instead of carrying the question home. That it was the kind of simple wisdom children often offered because adults had spent too many years making fear complicated. The house stood at the end of a quiet street lined with maple trees. Its white paint was peeling, and weeds had grown around the porch steps, but flower pots filled every sunny window. Corwin recognized Elowen's love of color immediately. Even during their poorest months, she had collected chipped bowls and planted herbs in them because she said living things made small spaces feel hopeful. Solara entered first while Corwin and Tavian waited outside. A few minutes later, the door opened again. Elowen stood in the shadow of the hallway, one hand gripping a wooden cane. Time had changed her, but not enough to hide the woman Corwin remembered. Her hair, once worn long, now brushed her shoulders with strands of silver near the temples. Pain had sharpened her face, and exhaustion lived beneath her eyes. Yet when she saw him, the years seemed to disappear from both of them. Her hand rose to her mouth. Corwin had prepared himself for anger, but what he saw in Elowen's expression was terror. She tried to step backward. Her injured leg buckled, and Corwin crossed the porch before he could think, catching her by the arms. For one suspended moment, they stood close enough to hear each other breathing. Then Elowen pulled away and lowered herself into a chair near the doorway. The girls gathered around her. Tavian remained beside Corwin, silent and watchful. What followed was not a dramatic reunion filled with easy forgiveness. It was a painful unearthing of truths buried beneath 11 years of shame. Elowen explained that shortly before she disappeared, she had discovered she was pregnant. She had been frightened but happy, believing Corwin would be frightened and happy too. Before she could tell him, her father intercepted medical results mailed to his house. He considered Corwin beneath their family and believed marriage would destroy Elowen's future. He threatened to have Corwin falsely accused of stealing prescription medication from his clinic, where Corwin had occasionally repaired equipment. Elowen initially refused to leave, but her father presented documents that appeared to show an active police investigation. He told her Corwin would avoid prison only if she ended the relationship and disappeared. Young, pregnant, and terrified, Elowen believed him. Her father moved her to another state and controlled every call and letter. Months later, she learned the investigation had never existed. By then, her father had become seriously ill, and Elowen was carrying not one baby, but twins. She wanted to return, yet shame stopped her. She feared Corwin would hate her for leaving and feared even more that he had moved on. After the twins were born, she tried to contact him through an old friend, but the friend reported that Corwin was engaged to someone else. So Elowen stayed away. Years passed. She later became pregnant twice more through a relationship that ended when the man refused responsibility. By then, her life had become a series of hard choices made while trying to protect children who depended on her. She followed Corwin's life from a distance only once, learning that he had married and become a father. When she eventually heard about Mireya's death, she wrote him a letter, but she never sent it. She told herself that appearing during his grief would be selfish. Corwin listened with tears burning behind his eyes. Anger rose inside him, not only toward Elowen's father, who had died years earlier, but toward the silence that had stolen so much time. He asked the question that frightened him most. If Elowen had been pregnant when she left, where were those children now? Elowen looked toward Bryony and Callista. The twins stood frozen beside the table. They were 7, not 10, which initially made the timing seem impossible. Then Elowen explained that her first pregnancy had ended in premature loss during the stress of relocation. The daughters Corwin had never known had lived less than a day. Bryony and Callista had been born years later, but Elowen had given all 4 girls middle names connected to the stars because of the compass tattoo and the children she had lost. Corwin lowered his head. He mourned 2 daughters he had never held, never named, and never known existed. His grief did not arrive loudly. It moved through him like winter, quiet and complete. Tavian took his hand. A moment later, Fenna took the other. They remained that way in the sunlit room, a tired single father, 4 little girls, a boy who understood loss, and a woman whose fear had shaped every year of her adulthood. Corwin could not forgive everything in one afternoon. Real life did not heal that quickly. He told Elowen that her father had deceived her, but the later years of silence had still been her choice. Elowen accepted this without defending herself. She said she had spent so long believing she did not deserve forgiveness that she had confused punishment with responsibility, that honesty mattered more than any excuse. Corwin and Tavian left before sunset, but Corwin returned the next morning. Then he returned again. At first, he came only to repair the broken porch rails so Elowen could walk safely. Tavian helped the girls repaint flower pots while Corwin replaced loose boards. The following weekend, he fixed the leaking kitchen faucet. After that, he installed a handrail in the hallway and adjusted Elowen's desk so she could restore books without worsening her back pain. He did not arrive as a rescuer, and Elowen did not become a helpless woman waiting to be saved. She continued working, attending physical therapy, and raising her daughters with fierce devotion. Corwin simply became part of the effort, the same way she slowly became part of his life. She helped Tavian restore a damaged storybook that had belonged to Mireya. She listened when Corwin spoke about his late wife, never treating that love as competition. On difficult days, she allowed him to be angry. On better days, They remembered the two young people who once believed a tattoo could protect them from losing their way. The children formed their own family long before the adults dared to name what was happening. Solara became protective of Tavian at school. Bryony and Callista joined him in rebuilding the treehouse, while Fenna declared herself responsible for snacks and quality control. The backyard filled with daytime laughter, paint-splattered hands, and the ordinary chaos Corwin had once believed would never return to his home. Months later, during a neighborhood festival held beneath a bright spring sky, Elowen walked without her cane for the first time. Her steps were slow, and pain still tightened her face, but she crossed the grass toward Corwin while all 5 children watched. When she reached him, she did not ask for the past to be erased. She only asked whether they could build something honest from what remained. Corwin looked at the faded compass on his arm. The broken circle had once represented imperfection. Now he understood it differently. A break was not always the end of a shape. Sometimes it was the place where new people entered. He told Elowen they could begin with tomorrow. Tomorrow became another week, then another season. There were difficult conversations, counseling sessions, financial setbacks, and moments when old fear returned. Yet they kept choosing honesty over disappearance. Corwin learned that second chances were not single dramatic moments. They were hundreds of small decisions made after the dramatic moment had passed. A year after the lemonade stand, the family gathered beneath the restored treehouse for a daytime picnic. The structure was painted sky blue, with 5 small stars above the door. Solara had added a 6th star for Elowen and a 7th for Corwin. Tavian had painted a broken circle around them all. Elowen stood beside Corwin and revealed a small change to her tattoo. At the opening in the broken circle, she had added 5 tiny dots for the children, with 2 faint stars above them for the babies they had lost. Corwin's eyes filled as he realized the symbol no longer belonged only to a love interrupted by fear. It belonged to survival, memory, and a family created from people who had every reason to remain broken but chose to become whole together. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Ecoverse. Your support helps stories of healing, kindness, and second chances reach someone who may desperately need hope today. And before the story ends, please comment, "Love can still find its way home," in honor of every person trying to forgive, rebuild, or begin again. As the afternoon sunlight passed through the branches, Corwin watched Tavian and the 4 girls race across the yard. Their laughter rose above the fence and drifted toward the quiet street where a lemonade stand had once changed everything. Elowen slipped her hand into his, not as the woman who had vanished, but as the woman who had finally returned with the courage to stay. Corwin looked down at their matching tattoos and understood that the compass had never failed them. It had simply taken the long road, and sometimes, the longest road home leads to the family your heart had been searching for all along.